Welcome everyone to our first autumn gathering in a team coaching circle. Obviously, if you are in the northern hemisphere, for those who are on the southern side, obviously it's a spring. And as we are stepping in to this new season, it's a great opportunity for us to pause for a moment, reflect, and look ahead together. So welcome joining and landing into the session today. My name is Egle Holton. I'm a team coaching practitioner and the host for today's session. And today, as you can see, is a very special one. We are actually celebrating our very first birthday. So Team Coaching Circle was created just a year ago as learners community and primarily focused on the team coaches. And the vision was simple: how we can bring coaches together beyond a specific school, discipline, or even accreditation body into this open space for connecting and exploring. So over the last 12 months, I was counting, we grew from 30 people to reach over 600 practitioners worldwide. We held 17 practice sessions, the team coaching circles with inspiring speakers, and we were exploring topics from team coaching competencies to AI in coaching, as well as practical frameworks, tools, and case studies. And I just wanted to acknowledge that none of this would have been possible without the continued support by ICF Ireland chapter. So big thank you for being part of this journey. And just as importantly, none of this would be possible without engagement of this community. So thank you for every single one of you for showing up, for contributing and co-creating this space together. So starting this September, we are very excited to introduce new partnerships and ways to engage more deeply into Team Coaching Circle. First of all, we will be collaborating with Global Institute of Team Coaching Supervision, and we will offer team coaching supervision labs, both in group and one-on-one setting. So obviously with a focus on team coaching. So if you want to learn more, I will ping a quick link into the chat where you can find all the details, register. It's offered free of charge. We're just kind of piloting, looking how it's going to land and if people are interested. And if you want to be one of the first ones to kind of share and bring your case to the group team coaching supervision, please directly message me over chat today or over the email on the teamcoachingcircle.com website. So that's the first one. And then secondly, we will be partnering with Dr. Sebastian Fox on his research project, where we will be given the opportunity to contribute to the important research project in the team coaching field. So more details to come, and we'll share those later in the next few months. Obviously, we will continue with our monthly gatherings, which is the heart of this community, so that we keep connecting, keep learning, and sharing the practice together. So plenty of exciting opportunities ahead, and watch the space. I think that we are now landed, everyone, into the main room, and let's shift the gear and onto our session for today. We are going to explore a very, very interesting theme: the value of team coaching, why it matters, and how we as practitioners can communicate value of team coaching more effectively. And I'm absolutely delighted to introduce today's panelists, experienced practitioners who will bring wealth and insight into our conversation. So I hope you see them pinned on the screen. So very warm welcome, first of all, to Caroline Duffy, the founder of Aube Coaching and faculty member of Team Coaching Studio, where she mentors and team coaches. Hi, Caroline.
Hey, thanks for having me, Egle. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Lovely. Great to have you, Caroline, and thanks for joining the panel. Next, we have Kate Rooney, who is a director at OnLex Agency, known for her very high energy style and working with teams for multiple years now. Kate, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Egle. It's an absolute pleasure.
Lovely. And finally, Michael Cooper, Director of Coaching Unity and faculty member of Systemic Team Coaching, with 2 decades of working with leadership and team. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Egle, and congratulations on the 1 year anniversary for Coaching Circle.
Yeah,
That's
thank you very
wonderful.
much. Thanks, Mike. So all the practitioners are bringing their unique perspectives, and what we're going with the way how we're going to run the panel. We first of all will start with a quick round of question for each of the panelists, to essentially just to explore their view on what's value proposition, for them and how they are look at it, and then we'll kind of have a little bit more targeted questions in a session. Afterwards, towards the end of the session, I'd love to kind of open the floor for all of your comments or questions. So please keep that chat going, and we'll monitor the chat. And obviously, you will be able to unmute yourselves too and share your comments or questions. All right, so let's dive in. So to get us started, I'd like to invite each of you, Caroline, Kate, Mike, to share your perspective. What is the core value proposition of team coaching for you, and why does it matter in today's organizational landscape? Caroline, why don't we start with you?
Lovely, thanks, Egle. Yeah, what a great question. I guess for me, when I start working with a team, what I see is that a team is often a collection of really talented individuals. So people who have, created success in their own field with their own particular potentially functional areas. I think what team coaching, how it brings the value is that it helps those really talented and experienced individuals harness collective intelligence. So it helps them to access and unlock their kind of collective potential and what they can achieve together. Um, and, for me, team coaching, it's different to facilitation or team development or training because it works in real time with those individuals, helping them build their collective potential, focusing on the dynamics and the dialogue, and helping them really work to their decision making, solving problems, and really getting a deeper level of commitment. So the fact that team coaching works over time, it's about really building, a sustainable impact over time for the team and helping them come together in cohesion and unity is for me partly where the difference is. And it feels like that's really important. Teams are really important at the moment in the world that we're in. It's a very complex, pacey, uncertain world that organizations and the teams within them are navigating at the moment. So having teams who have the capability to adapt, to flex, to work with each other, to have the really brave conversations where they need to, and therefore to get to kind of better decisions that people stick with and follow through on feels like it's really important in today's world.
Thank you, Caroline. What kind of sticks out for me is that kind of that collective intelligence, that harnessing that collective intelligence in the world, which is changing faster than ever, and kind of being able to develop the capacity to flex and adapt as a team, as a group, seems to be a really important elements to be supported by team coaching. Thank you for opening the discussion. And Michael, I want over to you. I'm just kind of, how would you describe?
Yeah, it's a great question. The so so I think I myself, because I came from an executive coaching background, fell into the trap when I first started doing team coaching of thinking that it was all about the interactions between the people exclusively. And then I met a lot of coaches who come from a more consulting background, and it was interesting. They believed that the solution was purely in sorting out the processes and the transactions. Um, and I think this is what makes team coaching so different is it's both of those and neither of those. So it's this realization of if you only look at the team as in the bubble like so many do, you get this very internal focus where everybody looks internally. And the myth is that if we can just fix the internal, how we all work together and everyone can work nicely together, we'll be able to make the team more value add and amplify its value to the organization. And I think that's what team coaching does is it holds that, but it says, but there's so much more to it than that. so bringing the systemic approach of the outside in approach around a team doesn't exist for the sake of being nice to one another, and a team doesn't exist purely for the interpersonal interactions between one another, but to deliver consistent value to the stakeholders. So that lens that you bring of outside in and the greater meaning and purpose of the team. And I think something Caroline said is so important is the value that teams add. If you look at key teams in an organization, they are often responsible for really huge rollouts and deliverables in organizations. And yet, once again, this myth of if we just throw 20 really clever people in a room together, they'll figure it out. And they don't. So that extra skill of knowing how to bring a team together, bring the outside perspective in, work on the interpersonal, and then communicate the value that you've done back into the organization. There's a complexity there, and I think that's where having the external perspective of the team coach can make a huge difference for an organization.
Thanks, Mike. Such a lovely way to frame it. It's working with teams is not about only what's happening within the team, but that kind of the importance and significance of outside in perspective and holding both lenses in the work. Thank you for sharing. And Kate, I'm curious, why does team coaching matter right now, and what's a key value in your words which it delivers?
I think the two guys have covered almost everything I was going to say. But
Sorry.
You're asking about right now, and I do like to get to the nub of things. Why is it important today? Why is it important in the world that we live in right now? It's very, very simple in my perspective, and that is communication. It starts and ends with communication, and that is in a real state of flux within organizations at the moment. And if it's in a state of flux within organizations, you can bet your bottom dollar it's in a state of flux within the teams within those organizations. And team coaching creates an environment, a space with no agenda. The team coach is going in with no agenda, and certainly that's the part I play. I'm not here with an agenda. I'm here to work with the team. And there's very few teams and very few organizations that don't have a specific agenda or don't have kind of skin in the game. And I think if you go into that room as the coach without skin in the game and without an agenda and are there for the team, to work with the team and dance and sing to whatever music they are playing, I think that's a very different space. And I think that's very new and very fresh. And my experience is teams buy into that very, very quickly. And we start to see things change. And ultimately, that's what the stakeholders want. They want a change. They want a shift. And that can't be done communicating the way that they're currently communicating. And that's the part of the team coach, I think, in my opinion. So nice and simple, nice and clean, no agenda based. And as you said as well, Mike, that fresh perspective, that clean lens. And that lens to me is that non-agenda lens. Yes, we might have something topical that we need to get done, but we're not in just to fix that or just on that agenda. And I think that's what team coaching can do in the world that we live in right now.
Thanks, Kate. So something around the freshness of a perspective and inviting teams in quite a new space to work on what matters to them and the organizations. Thank you. Caroline, let's kind of, dive into a little bit more targeted questions. And I wonder if you could share with the audience any kind of specific examples where you've seen team coaching had a really measurable impact on organizational performance and what helped, let's say, clients to recognize that value.
Yeah. Just as I think about it, there's a client that I worked with. They're a UK-based retail organization. And so I would have worked with them until last year over a 2-year period, supporting them through a period of significant change. So they had a CEO who had recently taken up their new position. He had changed around the structure and the makeup of the executive team. And the the board had made really clear that they needed to get some serious shifts around business performance. So it was a very competitive market, the retail market in the UK. So they were facing a lot of drop in share price, erosion of market share, that kind of thing. So some very serious performance indicators that they've been facing. And they also had a lot of inefficiencies internally. So there's a lot of work to do, and I was given the referral in to work with the organisation. And so we started on a team coaching process over a period of years. And the work involved a series of sessions. Some of them were full day, some of them were shorter sessions, some of them were off-site, some of them were on-site, working with the team in their kind of natural working environment. So we really kind of mixed it up. We also did some remote, virtual, and in-person pieces as well. And the work focused very much on supporting them to think about, so to create the change that we need to create, to take care of our customers, the people who shop in our stores. And this was I guess, following on from COVID, from Brexit in the UK. So there were big supplier issues. There was a lot of challenges they were dealing with. How do we, go about creating a valuable experience for the customers in our store? And what do we need to do as the leadership team to help with that? So a lot of the work was around what do we need to do? How do we need to lead on culture? How do we work in that? What are the really hard conversations we need to have in relation to how we work together, how we share information, collaborate, work through different challenging issues, and how do we stop dropping the ball in the gaps in between all of our different functions, because we're doing a lot of that at the moment. So those were some of the key areas that they identified they want to work on. So we did a lot of work on helping them build their skill in having good dialogue with each other. So addressing the issues, working through things. We really worked to support them to raise their awareness around their norms and their patterns, how they would get stuck and spin a lot, how some people, didn't contribute very much when they had a lot to, whereas others dominated. So we worked on a lot of those patterns and norms with them. And also, I did a lot of work with the CEO outside of the room, really supporting him and working with him in terms of how does he take what happens in each session and working with the team outside of whenever we were in team coaching to do that. And what they started to notice in terms of change over time was that they were getting better. There was better trust, there was better psychological safety. We were able to track that a little bit. But they were also increasing market share. They were also, share price was starting to go back up, even with significant headwinds against them. They were starting to make progress and regain share and spread their presence more. And so they were starting to hit those performance indicators. And not all of it was due to the team coaching, obviously, but they were, really happy that their work and how they had really become more cohesive, more collaborative, and more honest with each other had significantly contributed to them achieving those outcomes. So that for me just felt really compelling, that they were able to, mark that shift.
Thank you, Caroline. And what strikes me is that what you mentioned, that that work kind of evolved throughout the years. Kind of you mentioned that's because it was a long-term engagement, and I wonder, how that kind of your approach maybe shifted throughout the years, or that kind of long-term to in support of delivering on those KPIs and measures.
Yeah, so over time, and this tends to be how I work with a lot of teams, is that up front there'd be maybe a bit more structure and guardrails that we'd have in place, supporting the team, helping them to build the capability, and then that as time goes off, the approach evolves, and it did in this case, into more attending their meetings, supporting them as they build capability, and really working with them to own it themselves. So it's almost like as coach, I step back more and more as time goes on, and as they build their capability to do this themselves, almost self-coach in some ways. So.
Lovely. In a way, kind of, handing over, right? The capability, building that internal capacity to self-coach themselves. Thanks, Caroline. Appreciate that. And I just wanted to encourage the audience, as you are listening, if you have any questions or comments, we can kind of, share those in the chat or raise. I see that Matthew raised a hand. Are we okay to pick up the questions? Yeah, now as we are kind of speaking. Yeah. Yeah, Matthew. What would be your?
I've only got 10 minutes, so I said I'd buzz in. When I hear value proposition coming from a sales background, that I hear it from a sales point of view. And Caroline, you mentioned about the share value and stuff like that. And I'm just wondering, like when you don't have a referral into a client, how can you build that value proposition to sell team coaching to somebody?
Yeah, well, you don't have the kind of the warm landing.
Well, like you're selling it, let's say, to the CEO, whose bonus is determined by share value, by shareholders, confidence, all that kind of stuff. And you're trying to figure out what is the value of the service that I'm bringing, not the service I'm bringing, but the value the customer will get.
Yeah.
And that's what you're selling.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I guess I suppose my approach, and I know Egle, we're going to talk about this a little bit as we close, is not to. I don't see it as selling. I mean, it is selling, but it's about, so if this is a long-term partnership, where are you as the client? What are your challenges? What's going on for you? Where are your pain points? And let's work in that, because maybe it's actually exec coaching that the person needs, or maybe they just need facilitation of their strategy. However, if it is, a conversation that says, right, okay, actually, there's probably something here where we could do some really good team coaching. There seems to be readiness and appetite from this initial conversation. Then I'd start to speak to that in terms of how a team coaching partnership approach over time could lead to that sustainable outcome, and speak directly to the pain points. And often, clients will say, and Mike and Kate, I can see you nodding, as well, that that it is about collaboration. It's about how we get better at that. We have a demanding system. We have demanding stakeholders. We need to service a lot, be it our customers, citizens, the board, the shareholders, whoever that is. We need to service all of that, and we need to be fit and ready to do that. So there's work for us to do in ourselves at an individual, at a collective, and then at that systemic level to be able to do in that. So I guess my approach is to find out, where is the client, what do they need, what are the challenges, and then what are my thoughts on how I could support or partner around that.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline. In a way, kind of moving away from the supplier relationship to that kind of partnership and long-term engagement, and finding the right way, the right tool for the right occasion, right? Mike, you wanted to add something to this?
Yeah, so I was actually going to go in this direction with the question that you're going to ask me around how do you shape help an organization see the value in it, and I think what the word that you both used here, which is really important, is that not using a selling approach is fundamental in team coaching. So it's that, like, deep curiosity, really strong interest, and asking the questions that bring in the context, because the value is that if you try and sell value, then you put a lot of pressure on yourself to define the value, and what one particular leader or one particular organization sees as valuable will be totally different to the team next door, who has a different leader, different stakeholders, different context, different age. So moving away from feeling like we have to come up with the value and sell it, rather if you can go in really, really interestingly curious, non-judgmental, supportive, what's going on for you, what are your biggest challenges, what's happening in your environment, what would happen if you solved this in the next 5 years, what would happen if you didn't solve this in the next 5 years, what would it be like if your team came together and you could just get 5% more value out of every individual. So simple questions that really just help the leader to start unpacking the value for themselves. Because if you get that, one, you've already played a huge role for themselves. In one is they're starting to see the value. Secondly, you've already shown your ability to work with them in their context, and just partner with them. And then it's a very simple question to transition from that, which is, that sounds really awesome, what you're telling me. Tell me what conversations you probably need to have in order to do this. And they'll tell you, we've probably got to do this. How could I partner with you in order to achieve that or to accomplish that? So through a very simple questioning, one is they've seen the value, the energy's there, and then that simple question, how can I partner with you to do that work? So now you're co-opting to work alongside them to achieve a particular value. And that idea of coming in as working alongside someone in order to achieve a value is often then the key to, well, what could that look? They then turn to you as the expert in, well, what could this look like? Could you give me some suggestions of what that could look like? And that becomes a really nice opportunity then to say, well, here's an idea of what this could look like for you.
It's interesting. You're actually describing consultative selling as opposed to the stuff that you're probably thinking about from Wall Street or something like that.
Yeah.
Good guy. I have to head off there. Take care.
Right.
Thanks,
Matthew.
Bye.
Thank you, Matthew. I wanted to acknowledge that we have one comment in chat and then one raised hand. So maybe, Osama, you've been holding the hand for quite a while. Would you like to enter this space and share your comments or questions?
Thank you. Thank you all. Very stimulating start. I want to build up on Kate's comment related to a space with no agenda. And similar to the start of coaching in general and that debate around directive, non-directive, how much can the coach influence the process? And it seems the debate around team coaching is more in favor of the team coach to play more of a consultative role, especially at the start, when doing the diagnostics part, then to come up with certain recommendations related to what is needed as developmental objectives for that team. And the point I would love to hear more about is how to differentiate. And I'm in favor of the very non-directive way of doing it. But then to be convincing for the buyer, not for the team themselves, for the HR and the talent development, to buy in the story of non-directive team coaching approach seems to be less impactful for them. So how do you think I would love to hear some insights as well. Thank you.
I'm happy to go there if you're okay. I think that's really interesting. And yes, there's a massive debate on coaching directive, not directive. And if you are directive as a coach, are you in fact coaching? Do you know? So we could talk about that all day long. I think there's two different conversations. One is we're having that more business buy-in conversation with the stakeholders. And in that conversation, I don't believe, and again, only my perspective, I don't believe we're coaching in that instance. I do believe we're having a somewhat business conversation. The stakeholders have an issue, they have a challenge, and they want to see how that's going to be fixed. And they're potentially looking at team coaching as a solution to that. Caroline, absolutely. I think it's really important to establish, do they actually, in fact, require team coaching as the very, very beginning, because we're not there to sell team coaching. We're there to offer the best solution to the challenge that they're having. And in my experience, that's not always team coaching. You know, it's not always team coaching. So in that instance, we're trying to find out what is the issue that they're having, and do we possess the tools and the solution to maybe work with that. At that stage, I'm not talking to them, Osama, about a non-directive approach. I'm not really talking to them about coaching at that stage at all. I'm talking to them about the problem and what might a solution to that problem look like? Not how will we fix it, but what will it look like when it's fixed? So for instance, if that's something simple like communication, the issues with communication, how communication are affecting the team, and how would that look if communication wasn't a problem? But I'm not going into tools and coaching and fluffy talk at that stage, because I think that's where we can lose a potential client. That's for the room. In the room, it is absolutely non-directive in regards to the coaching that I do. So I would consider myself a non-directive coach. And in the room, we're working with top line themes, and communication may be one, but then we're allowing that room to come up with the answers to that. So for me, it's two different conversations, two different hats, two different spaces that you're holding, because we need the stakeholders' buy-in to get into the room. But when we're in the room, we're not speaking to the team like we were the stakeholder, or vice versa. So I don't know if that makes sense, Osama, but for me, it's two very, very different spaces, therefore two very, very different conversations, very different dialogue, very different words, very different language, in order to try to hold that space. And just to kind of pick up from what Mike said with regards to the selling bit and the partnership bit, I absolutely get the partnership bit, and I agree with that partnership bit. But I do believe that when we're in with a stakeholder, there is an element of business. We're having a business conversation. And it may not sound nice to say we're having a selling conversation, but we are, in essence, having a selling conversation as well. Because at the end of the day, we've got a product and a service. And if somebody is accepting that product and that service, then that's a sale. So my approach to that is, coming from a sales background, coming from a KPI background, I feel quite comfortable in that space with that type of a conversation. But I'm also very aware that in that room, I am not the coach. And I think that's the key. I'm not actually selling them coaching. I'm selling them me. And I'm selling them the coaches that I work with, and the solution. And the method that I use happens to be coaching. And I think if we try to sell coaching and we use the word sales, I think we can absolutely run into problems, because it becomes too abstract. There's no clarity around it, and we can get really, really stuck in the grey matter.
Love that, Kate. That delineation of different conversations, different rooms, and being very intentional, what's happening in each of those. Osama, any comments or questions before we close the segment? Yeah.
Thank you. I'm okay.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you. Rachel, you left a few really interesting comments in the chat. Would you like to unmute yourself just to share your observations? Or
Sure.
Thank you.
And I was just drawn to the session that you hosted with Seb Fox and the research that he shared, which I thought was really, really practical around that. It's showing that if we're speaking to Matthew's, there's kind of an evidence-based approach to team coaching, that the teams value not just the outcomes in teams coaching, and that's where our contract is, I suppose, as part of the process, but also the experience, like what happens through this process. And I think that's a very easy thing to speak to in our work, the value of it, the kind of what to get from that process of being able to have difficult conversations, etc. That was just one kind of that I was struck by. And then the final piece is, the kind of the non-directive, to me, doesn't preclude us from being passionate, and allows us to advocate very strongly for what the team says it wants for itself. So that to me is completely aligned. It doesn't mean we have to dial down or be other than we are. I think we're drawn to this because we want good outcomes for the team, but the outcome is owned by the team. We're advocating for them to get themselves there. So yeah, does that make sense?
Thank you, Rachel. And yeah, that kind of, what you just shared around the research done by Sebastian Fox. For those who are interested, I can later on just find the link to the recording where, he was sharing essentially his insights from working with teams and research, and kind of not necessarily just kind of, I suppose surprising outcome of that research was that it's not necessarily what is being contracted in the very beginning, what teams find most helpful. And that kind of emergence, throughout the process is so critical. Again, Caroline, it speaks to what you were mentioning. As we are working with teams for an extended period of time, things change, dynamics shift, organizations reorg, right? So it's so natural to kind of adjust and be agile in that state of flux. I'd like to shift the gear and kind of, talk about a little bit about the systemic lens, right? Mike, just to you maybe, you've been working in a systemic team coaching space, and I wonder, what role the context, the industry, the dynamics might play in the conversations which we're having about the value of team coaching, and how do we adapt?
So it's bringing the context into the room all the time, and it's that ability to do that. So it's often the missing piece with the where teams sometimes can get a bit of a tunnel vision, and where organizations sometimes hinder teams sometimes. So what you find often is you look at a team that's trying to function, and the way that the team is measured, the way that the team is empowered, authorized, the processes in the organization actually undermine the team. And that ability to highlight the context in which the team is operating that either support or hinder the team, and then to not be victims to that, but allowing the team then to take ownership of all. What are we in control of? What are we not? So it's just bringing that conversation into the room continually, so that the team feels, well, does it work for us? Do we want to change that? And then engage with the organization once again, either to reset measurements, boundaries, outputs, permissions, those type of things. So that context conversation helps tremendously, because it stops the conversation becoming a moan session where we're being set up to fail because we're trying to achieve this and we can't because of all these reasons. Okay, so if you take ownership of the context that you operate in as well, what can you do about that, and how will you engage with that? So that's such a fantastic conversation around context. And if I can cycle back to that last conversation, because I find such an interesting conversation where people want to go, so is it advocacy or non-advocacy? Am I consulting or am I coaching? Is it pure coaching, or is it and moving away from from excluding anything, even in yourself, and asking the question, like, what's the context? Because even that becomes a context question. Like, in the context of the conversation I'm having right now, do I need to sell, or do I need to consult, or do I need to coach? And can I have all three skill sets available to me, depending on the context? So context becomes really, really interesting, even in the role that we play, because in a way we are experts, in the sense of our expertise lies in understanding how teams function and the context that and sometimes they ask us, like, what could this look like, a rollout, for example, of some team coaching? And the moment we do that, we're bringing our expertise of team coaching into it. So to say I have no expertise, well, then you're robbing yourself of opportunities. So sometimes just the moving away from wanting to box ourselves as coaches, and this is where team coaching is different, I think, to one-on-one coaching, because you do sometimes have to dance between the roles that we play, but the self-awareness of, am I playing the right role at the right time and having the right conversation in the right way? That context, if you have that contextual awareness the whole time, that becomes like a team coach who can really, really make a difference.
Lovely. Something about the kind of invitation for us as practitioners to really look how we can expand our range, right?
Yeah.
Kind of, move in those roles skillfully. Thank you, Mike. Again, just wanted to invite the audience, please do, raise your hand if something comes up and is of resonance and you would like to ask any questions, or, pop up the questions in the chat. And as we continue this conversation, Kate, I'd like to kind of come to you with this is a cheeky question, not a cheeky question. It's about, how do we manage the challenging stakeholders, the skeptics in the room, right? What would be your tip, advice to approach, leaders who are skeptical, who are, budget holders who are kind of question the ROI of team coaching. So I wonder, and again, Mike, Caroline, would be great to hear from you. I'm sure that you probably had those, but Kate, if you could start there.
The dreaded ROI. Yeah, the dreaded ROI. How do we prove it? I think, if you're team coaching, then one of your skills as a team coach is reading the room, being able to read the room. And that skill should be very present with those stakeholders. Read the room with the stakeholders in the room. And as a team coach, I think we're really, really good at, and we have to be very careful at it as well, but we have to be tapped into our intuition. What are they telling me? What are they not telling me? What are they saying? What are they not saying? And Mike, to kind of back up what you said, lots of great questions. We're not coaching in that space, but we're always asking questions. And by asking questions, we're encouraging reflection, and we're making the stakeholders think about things that they hadn't thought about. They've maybe come in with a very clean script. One of my tactics or strategies is to kind of, let's remove the script. And I do like to stir the pot. As a personality, I stir the pot. I've stirred it a tiny little bit here, only a little bit, Egle. I'm on my good behavior today, but I will stir the pot in that space. I will, try to move away from script so that we get a raw, real, natural conversation going. One of the other kind of key things is really trying to get that stakeholder to the place of, when this is done, if this was done, what would this look like? What would this feel like? So again, we're not coaching. I kind of call it playing. I like to play, bounce the ball, and then they'll bounce it back. And we kind of, once we're bouncing the ball, I think we're in. But it's read the room. Do not be coming in with a clear-cut way of how you're going to do it. And context is absolutely critical, Mike. So read the room and figure out, where are we? The other thing in response to what Rachel, I think, a wee bit of what you might have been talking about, Rachel, is we need to show up on purpose. Our personal brand is on show in this room. So we can't morph into what the room wants us to be, what those stakeholders need us to be. If they need us to be something that's very far removed from who we are as a coach and the work that we do, then they need a different coach. And I think we need to be strong enough and brave enough to show up as ourselves. And again, we are the expert in that room. We're not the expert in the coaching space, but I do believe we're the expert in that room. They do require guidance, but they also require that bit of play, that bit of playfulness as well. Language is important. Language is really important. And, the name has escaped me. It'll come back to me. But the words that we use create the world that we live in. And we can create the world, of coaching in that space if we're smart with how we use the words and we read the room effectively. Another tactic, strategy, call it whatever you want, is I insist on one-to-ones with team members prior to giving the stakeholders an idea of what we're going to do. I can't tell stakeholders what we're going to do and not have met the team. So I will always ask for maybe a few team members to come forward that I will speak to confidentially to check that the themes match both sides before I lay down a proposal. And that means when I do lay down a proposal, I am kind of stacking the odds in my favor better at being able to hit the nail on the head. So there's a bit of strategy involved. There is a bit of personal brand involved. There is a bit of coaching involved. And then there is a change in stance. We are the expert in that room. We're not the expert in the room with the clients. We're not the expert with the team. But in that room, they do require some guidance. It can't be, what do you think? It's too broad. So I think sometimes we need to narrow that down. So I hope that helps a little. Gives you an insight into a wee bit of the way I do things, which is, straight, but I like to stir it a little bit as well.
Yeah, I love that steering and kind of, really leading with the idea of dropping the script and having the real raw conversation to get to the bone of the matter. Thank you, Kate, for sharing. Mike, I saw that you are kind of nodding the head. Any kind of, resonance around, or maybe tips how to manage those challenging, skeptical in the room, skeptics in the room?
Yeah, no, I just love be yourself and what's needed in the room, and sometimes and not being afraid to sometimes challenge. Because often what happens with the skeptical leaders is everyone around them says yes to them, or it gives them a version of what they want to hear, and what they miss sometimes is someone going, "But can I highlight something? Can I highlight a contradiction in what you're saying, or tell me how does this play out?" And that willingness to challenge often becomes the aha moment, because it's unusual often for difficult leaders, because everyone often tends to just cut out to them. And as a coach, if it also sets a frame right at the beginning, like even in the initial conversations of to push back against some of that bully behavior that comes from them. I have found rather than it being a negative, often becomes something that they go, but that's what we're looking for, is someone who can do this, who can actually challenge us, question us, push us. So demonstrate that right in the beginning, because I think the frames that you set in the initial conversation, if you're too passive, you're not going to hold the frames that are necessary for the whole journey. So that becomes really important.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I think there's very few clients bring a team coach in to sustain the status quo.
Hmm.
So there's something about the essence of coming in as a team coach is that you're there to disrupt
Yeah.
what is there, and you can do that in a very skillful way. For me, when there's a skeptic, be it a sponsor, stakeholder, the team lead, whoever, I always get really curious what sits beneath that. What's the real worry, maybe the real niggle, the real tension. Resistance is often just because there's other tensions or stuff going on there. So what sits beneath the surface, what's going on in the wider system? I always get really curious about that. And I think it also takes us back to one of the things we said way up front in this, which is sometimes the team just isn't ready. If the leader's not ready or a key stakeholder isn't ready, then maybe it's just not the right time to go into a coaching process. But there's other stuff we can do to support, to inform, to build capability. And maybe in a few months, that's when we can step into the team coaching space. So, I think there's always something about be ready just to say no, or maybe no, not right now. Let's look at some other pieces that we could do before this. So
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks, Mike, and Kate, for sharing. That's very helpful. And I'm just kind of, mindful of time. The hour almost flew by. It's been very, very fast. In the next 5 minutes or so, guys, the audience, if you want to kind of share any comments or questions, please do use this time. Otherwise, I would love to just invite you to share, Mike, Caroline, Kate, if there was one practical tip or piece of advice which you would like to share with the rest of the audience in terms of, how would you suggest communicating, delivering that value of team coaching, what that would be? One thing, one small tip, what helped you in the past?
So I'm just conscious my mic's off there, or on, I can go for it first. So I think for me, it's know yourself and be yourself. Know why you team coach, know why you're drawn to this work, what it gives you, how it serves you, because there is, back to that word purpose, there's normally a purpose or a reason that we are drawn to and stay with the messy stickiness of team coaching. It's not easy work, and everybody in this room will know that. So know why you do it, why you're drawn to it, and therefore what you bring, what your gift is, and be able to really clearly articulate that to the client in terms of what that will mean, how you can serve with that, and just keeping our language really simple. So, not selling team coaching and our complex methodologies, just speaking to the client's issues, challenges, world, and how we would love to support them and work with them.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd really echo that. And there's a development piece as well. So if we look at the course that we run, where we have a couple of hundred students coming in, and then those that graduate at the end, the difference between the ones who I know are going to be successful, you can see at the end, is that they're engaging with team coaching not just as a skill that I'm learning, but they realize that fundamentally the first thing to do is work on themselves as becoming a team coach. It's a becoming piece, not a doing piece. And so if you've got an ego, you're going to get triggered in the room because you're going to speak from ego and you're going to get triggered into ego. If you are afraid to speak up to strong people, work on that because it's going to happen in the room. If you feel like you're someone who always has to have an answer and be the expert, like do the work on that because it's going to get triggered in the room. So part of being the value is yourself as a vessel as a team coach, because I think Kate said it right up front. They buy you, and so be you right from the beginning. But you've got to do the work all the time to see where I'm getting triggered, like where I fall into the wrong behavior, and then go and do that work. As coaches, if you're not getting coached yourself, supervise yourself, and doing a lot of self-reflection work, you're gonna hit a limit at some point in time on where you can work and the kind of work you can do.
Thank you, Mike. And that's a great, add in a way, a bit of a product placement for the upcoming team coaching supervision labs, guys. So if you are interested, it's on our website and communication will come further. Kate, what would be your tip, advice to close this session?
Again, it kind of echoes, what has been said, but the reflection piece, how did I show up in that room today? And what version of me showed up, and is that what the team needed? And was I in the circle or outside the circle? And if I'm in the circle, what's my need and desire to be there? And just really, really, and really, really kind of deep reflection on that. I'm lucky that a lot of my clients are a good few hour drive away. So I have a reflection 2 or 3 hours, 4 hours at times in the car. And sometimes I get back and go, gosh, if I could turn this car around, I would do that differently, So that space and being able to be honest with yourself and honest with your coach and honest with your supervision, if the ego did show up or you were triggered, and knowing that that's not a feeling. That's not a feeling, because admitting that and being aware of that and willing to do the work, that's a strength. So I think being honest and being able to say that out loud, because just because you're in team coaching does not mean you're a perfect coach, and being willing to be the imperfect coach and accept that that's okay, I think is my advice.
Thank you, Kate. I love that. Invitation to accept that imperfection, the perfection of imperfect, knowing your why, as you, Caroline, were mentioning. And I'm just mindful where we are in time, and there are quite a few kind of comments or questions. Unfortunately, we won't be able to address them just because of the time limitation which we have. But I just really wanted to appreciate this honest, open conversation with 3 of you, Caroline, Mike, Kate, for sharing your tips so generously. It's been great session. And I suppose that, hopefully we will meet again in similar conversations in the future. It just kind of, I really feel energized after this discussion and really having that practical wisdom shared with the group. Thank you. Thank you all.